In today's video, I'm going to try and help you get as fast as you can at the brand new Daily Race C at Lago in Group 2 to avoid that dirty air. We're also going to give you some advice with regards to the tyre temperatures that will help you succeed in this race. So stick around, watch the video, give it a like if it helps you out, and subscribe to the channel. Now for this week's guide, we are using live stream footage that we've taken directly from the live stream, so the quality might be slightly lower than what you'd normally get on a video quality. And if you're wondering what telemetry app we're using, you can check that out in the link in the description there and download that also. It's very useful for this week's race. Now going into turn one, we're going to use the first black board above our head as our braking reference, but we're going to brake slightly past that, so you can see just past it onto the brakes now. And now we're going to work our way into turn one. Now you can actually use these next boards as a turning reference going into the corner. You can see this turning inputs will start going in just as we're dead level with them. You're going to start seeing the wheel turning into this corner now, and you want to get the left hand tire to go over the lower part of the curb. You don't want to get on the higher part because it'll unsettle the car. So you can see just grazing alongside the higher part there to avoid the unsettling of the car. Now into the next corner, you can see very early on the brakes here, you can actually see there's a nice crossover of tire marks there that you can use as your brake reference. Right in the middle of that, you get on the brakes and you want to hug this curb as much as possible. You can see them feathering the throttle about 60 to 70% before going aggressively on the exit, and now you're going to get the car all the way over to the right hand side. You want both tires over the white line, and you want to be turning in past the cross of the white lines there where they cross over. You want to be past that point before you're turning back into this left hand corner. Now again, through this curb you can see a little lift off the throttle. This just helps keep the car as close to the left hand side as possible and stops any understeer building up. And then onto the brakes early for this corner. It's very important to get early so that you can downshift, start rotating it in, downshift to second gear as well for that extra bit of rotation, then back up to third gear as you put the throttle down on the apex of the corner there. Now on the exit here, you can use a lot of the track exit. You can see the Ghost in front of me all the way over, and I actually slightly lose the rear here. You can see I was slightly up on my lap with the Delta I've got running with the telemetry. However, that little wiggle on the rear lost me a little bit going down this straight, so a little mistake there. Now going into the next braking reference, we're going to use again the curb where it ends there on the left as my reference, but again we're braking slightly past that because we're in Group 2. A lot of downforce, a lot of grip in these cars, and you want to try and get this car rotated into the curb. So you can see down to third gear, trail brake it in, and then on the throttle as aggressively as you can in this corner. I could have been a fraction more aggressive there, but not too bad overall. Now into this really fast flowing corner, you're going to be using the start of the curb as a reference, again braking just past that start of the curb, and you can see now from this point onwards you're going to start thinking about rotating it in because you want this left hand tire to get right over the curb. So at this point we're going to start turning into the corner, and you want this left hand tire, you can see here, over the curb almost onto the grass there, and then aggressively on the throttle. Now I slightly hit the curb wrong here with the rotation that I got really good rotation, and you're going to see we slightly lose the rear, but you want that left hand tire to make sure it doesn't go over that curb because it's very easy to pick up a penalty. And then again here you can really attack over the curb, and just be cautious you don't go too far over because you can pick up a penalty if you go a bit too much. Now through here it's all about just keeping it smooth, minimal inputs, try and keep the car to the middle there, don't go too far to the left for the longer distance, and then all the way down to the next braking zone, which we're going to use the 50 board. You can see approaching that 50 board now we're going to brake pretty much dead level with that 50 board, so aggressively on the brakes and aggressively with the downshifting as you're going through this part here. So you're going to wait until the end of the curb, and once you're at the end of the curb you're going to start rotating this car in. You can see where the arrow is in the distance. You want your right tire to be right up on this grey bit of tarmac. So second gear to rotate the car, then back up to third gear. Aggressive, you really need to be aggressive on that throttle on that corner because you gain a lot of time up this hill if you get aggressive there. And then it's completely flat out through these next corners, no need to lift, just take the shortest line possible through the corners and then up to the next braking zone, which again 50 board on the left hand side, braking just short of that 50 board. Now going into this corner you're going to see again as we start turning in pretty much level with the 50 board, you want to get the right hand tire up with it over the curb and then accelerate through the corner, and then you're looking for where the curb starts going into a point towards the actual tarmac of the track there. That's where you're going to be getting onto the brakes, and you can see there just before it happens we're onto the brakes and just a tiny dab of brakes going through. You're not going to be aggressive, it's just to put a bit of weight on the front tire so you can then accelerate through this corner. Now be careful at this point, you want the right hand tire to try and stay around about where that white line is. If you go too far over it can easily be a penalty, but we actually get away with that. And then into this final corner, it's all about being brave and carrying the speed. Now we're onto the brakes before the end of the curb, and we're going to actually turn in about where that square is anyway. So you can see at this point we're going to start turning the car in, and trying to get your left-hand tyre up over the curb on the left here. So you can see aggressively onto the curb and then aggressively onto the throttle. You want to be on that throttle nice and early, which we managed to do quite nicely there. And that's where I managed to gain a little bit back time on my previous lap. You can see it on the Delta there. And we go over the line for a 1:38.1. Now, there's definitely a 37 in that, like I say. But let's now go into the race situation and try and give you some advice with these tyres. And this is where the telemetry app really comes into its own with making you understand. I think the more I watch back on this footage, the more I start understanding where the temperatures are coming from. A lot of it is just basically down to steering angle. The more angle that you put into these corners when turning, that's where you're killing these tyres, because they overheat very quickly on the softs. Now, I did a pretty good job on this outlap, so if you keep an eye on the tyre temperatures at the moment, they're all in a very nice kind of cool shade of green. That's where the temperatures aren't actually, they're not actually in their operating range now, and you want to try and keep them in this range for as long as possible, because they will build up very, very quickly. So you can see what I'm doing as well is being a little bit more cautious on the downshifting. We're not going to slam through the gears as much as we normally do, and just trying to be progressive. And inputs, it's all about being smooth with your steering wheel or controller if you use a controller, and try not to put as aggressive steering angle into the corner. So when you miss in, you'll find when you miss an apex and then you have to put more steering angle in, that absolutely kills your tires, because what you're doing is you're putting an extra 20% of steering angle in and being on the accelerator to try and rotate it. And what's happening is you're just killing that tire that's on the load. So I'll give you an example of that in a minute, where it really shows you and highlights what that issue is. So yeah, if you haven't downloaded this telemetry app, I really recommend it. It's in the description. Check it out. It's worth using. It will help you out, and it's going to help you understand where your understeer is coming from in certain corners. When you still look like you've got grip on the tyre, there is a reason for this. So as you come through here, you can see we're going to go in a little bit too aggressive on the steering input now, and look at that right front tyre up to 93 degrees. Now, the important thing about this is your soft tyre, for example, once you start getting a bit of wear on it, once it goes over 90 degrees, it's just going to understeer. Now, the medium tyre is a bit more resilient to the overheating problem, but it still will happen. So let's have a little look now as we go through on the next lap. And now have a little look at this. We're only going up to 86 degrees because of steering input. Now check the two screenshots. Look at the difference in my steering angle. That is why we're overheating on that previous lap. You can see that extra steering angle is pushing them tyre temperatures up, and that's what you need to avoid. So it's all about getting into these apexes nice and early, and then avoiding that excessive input on the steering where you're accelerating and trying to fight that car back onto the track. It's all about being very smooth through the corner, getting as much curb as you can to reduce the amount of input you're putting into each corner. It really is a case of widening the lines, everything that you can do to stop the inputs going in as much. So less angle, less tyre wear. That is what you need to know for this race. Now, like I was saying before, the soft tyres, they have an optimal running pace of around 80, I feel. When they're at around 80, that seems to be their optimal peak grip level, between 80 and 84, 85, something like that. But when you see these go up to 90, they will just understeer. So you're going to see now with the front right tyre, as it creeps up to 90, the understeer will gradually start building in, and that's when you're going to have to just back off a little bit and just be careful. So again, here now on the end of lap 3, we're actually on a good lap, and you can see again, look at that steering angle that I'm putting in, because I turned in a little bit too late. I'm going a bit too aggressive, and again 93 on that front right. So again, a little bit of a mistake there, putting a bit too much temperature into that front tyre, but we still go over the line on lap 3 with our best lap of the race. So you can see we've done quite a good job overall with the tyre management. And now we're going to skip to lap 5, and you can see again now we're on lap 5, and we take a tighter line in this time, less steering input, we take a wider exit, and we don't go over that 90. But you can still see that because they're getting close to that 90 range on the fronts, the understeer is starting to creep in a little bit on the exits. You're getting less rotation, and now obviously the wear is coming in on the tyres. That's where it starts affecting them more. On the first, say, 15% of tyre life, you can actually put the temperature through them, and they will still give you the grip because they'll cool down quicker. But once you're starting to wear them out, they don't cool down as much, and that temperature's staying into the core of the tyre, which is meaning you're just getting a lot of understeer. Now, in terms of strategy for this race, I think the optimal is 6.6 in general, but what you need to be cautious of is keep an eye on the track temperatures, because every race has different temperatures. We've seen between 23 and 27 degrees. If you get a 27 degrees race, you really do need to be cautious. You might want to just do 5 laps on the softs if you're starting on softs. and then do the extra stint on the mediums, because the mediums, like I said before, will be more resilient to the heat. Now you can see that right front tyre building up to 90 there, and you'll start seeing the understeer building into the corners because it just doesn't want to turn as much. Now we've managed to drop it down on the front left, but again you can start seeing how the front left's building up as well in these corners, and you're just going to gradually build up the more and more understeer base. Now I stayed out for 7 laps on this thing because I think it was 24 degrees track temperatures in this race, and we stayed out for a second lap, but you can see our delta there is 1.2 seconds basically from our optimal lap. And at this stage now, the mediums are a better tyre. Now you do need to be very cautious in the race here though, because if you pit lap 6 and a couple of cars extend their stint and you come out behind them, the dirty air is that bad that you will physically find it very difficult to overtake them. Even if you're on fresher tyres, it is horrible following another car. It's almost impossible to overtake. So you really do need to think about your strategy. That's why I did it for this one, because I had enough of a gap, a big enough cushion. And if you're in that situation where you've got enough of a gap, and you can see there, look at that understeer where the front left tyre was starting to go a little bit too warm, and that's actually going to give us a penalty with the understeer that's created through this temperature in the tyre. And that's where your understeer is coming from. It's all about temperatures. But yeah, just be very careful. If you've got a gap, make sure that you utilise that gap and maybe do an extra lap. Take a second out of your overall race pace, which it will do. You'll lose a second, but it's probably better if you're not going to get that dirty air. And then you can see here, we're out into nice clean air, and now we're on the medium stint with just 5 laps to go. Now, if you're only doing 5 laps on the mediums, you can pretty much drive them quite aggressive, but you still do need to be aware of that operating temperature range. So for the first few laps, it's not going to affect it if you get that close to 90, but it will towards the end when it starts reaching that 88, 89 area on the tyre telemetry. It's going to start affecting how the grip will give you through the corners. It's normally on the exits of the corners when that it's building up the heat. The initial entry is not too bad. It's towards the end when, like this corner for example, when you're pushing the limits, it'll start understeering a bit and you'll start feeling like you might need to give it a little lift off the throttle. So just be very careful. Like I said, lower inputs equals less tyre wear equals less tyre temperature. Again, through this long left-hand corner, you can see again, staying at about 84 this time. They're a lot more resilient to being pushed, so I didn't really take it that easy through there, being quite aggressive. So for that initial 15%, 20% of the tyre life, it will give you a lot of resilience to the tyre temperatures. They won't build up that temperature as high as when it's about 40% gone. Once you're down to like 40% tyre wear, the tyres just, they've got no heat resilience at all, and they'll build up the temperatures and then you'll understeer, and that's what's happening. So for the people that aren't using telemetry and you're wondering why your car's understeering when you've still got like 70% left on your tyre, it's just tyre temperatures. That's all that's causing it, and it's really interesting to actually be using this app now. I'm so glad that I'm using it, because when I eventually move my setup, I'm going to have a separate monitor just for them tyre temperatures so I can actually see when I'm racing, because you know what you need to do, but when you can actually see the effects of it, it's going to be such a benefit to your racing, your consistency. As you can see that right front now building up to 88 there, but you can see it didn't really affect us at that stage. Now we're going to come to the end of the race here now, as we're coming into that last corner. You can see there 90, and you can see the understeer. Because we're at 90, you can actually see how much understeer is happening on that corner there, and we actually lost nearly 2 tenths just because of that. We were actually on our personal best on the mediums, and then that one corner, because I went too aggressive. If I would have been noticing that before I went into the corner, I could have just took it a little bit easier, maybe short shifted, maybe went down to 4th gear, get the rotation, then back up to 5th gear, avoided that excessive build up of temperature, and would have possibly been able to go over the line with 2-3 temps quicker than what I'd done previously on the mediums. But you can still see that even though them temperatures are like that, you can see the resilience in the mediums, because now we're still on a personal best lap. I think at this point we're up on that previous lap by a 10th. As you can see on the delta, we have this running as well to our previous laps. You can see we're a 10th up on our previous lap. So even though them temperatures are high on this medium tyre, because there's very little red that you can see on the actual tyre telemetry, you're able to still push them quite hard. There was a little bit of understeer there creeping in. You can actually see on the delta now we're losing a bit, because it went up to 91 degrees on that right front, and it almost felt like I had to lift a little bit. That's what it feels like, and that feeling that you're getting is purely tyre temperatures. Now, different cars will run slightly different. I know when we were doing Catalunya in Group 4 in the Nissan GTR and other cars, you could run 90 and you didn't really feel the understeer. It was on the hard tyres, but because there was no real tyre wear, you were getting up to 90 degrees and you wasn't really feeling that understeer because obviously the wear wasn't kicking in. Now, if that race had tyre wear and they were dropping below 40% or 50% on the tyre actual level of grip, you would notice a massive amount of understeer. But because that race was on ×1 and it wasn't really affecting it, you didn't really notice it. But now in this race, you really do feel it and notice it. So hopefully this video will help you out. If it has, get subscribed to the channel, hit that like button. Hopefully we can do more videos like this and maybe some more in-depth tyre temperature and what affects it and what will make you last a little bit longer in some future videos. But yeah, if you want to download the telemetry app, it's there in the description. Click that link, get it downloaded, and hopefully that will help you get faster on Gran Turismo. Take care, everyone.